The Garmin Forerunner 165 is probably the best fitness smartwatch for most of you, except for two types of users, and all of this will make a lot more sense once we put this watch in the context of the existing Garmin lineup. Hi everybody, foXnoMad here, and today I want to help you travel smarter with my review of the Garmin Forerunner 165. Now, if I were being lazy, I would say go watch my Forerunner 265 review, make a note of all the differences, and then just come back here and decide whether or not you want this watch, because there aren't a whole lot of differences between the 265 and the 165, at least not a lot of differences that are going to matter to most of you. It's hard to make a review about the Forerunner 165 without comparing it to the Forerunner 265 and to a lesser degree the Garmin Venue 3. So let me put things in context for you. The Forerunner 265 is a running focus watch that gives you around 40 activity profiles and costs $449. The Garmin Venue 3 is a smartwatch that has a lot of fitness features, but you can also make calls with it, cost $399. Then there's the new Forerunner 165 that has no microphone or speakers to make calls with like the Venue 3, has half the activity profiles of the 265, but costs only $249. And honestly, the Forerunner 165 is probably the best deal in the entire Garmin lineup right now. Here's why. The Garmin Forerunner 165 is very similar to the 265, but there are some key differences. The 165 comes in two versions, the regular for $249 or the music edition, which is $50 more and lets you load up to 500 songs that you can stream directly from your watch. That's good for long runs when you might not want to bring your phone along with you and travel lighter. Otherwise, both versions of the Forerunners are practically identical. Both use the same proprietary charging cable, have 5 buttons, 3 on the left, 2 on the right, and the same bright and colorful AMOLED screen. That screen is the same AMOLED screen on the 265, and like the 265, the 165 is fairly readable even in bright outdoor sunny conditions. It looks nice and the screen isn't rounded like the 265. The 165 has a flat touch screen and it honestly, I think, looks a lot better. It's also going to be easier to slap on a screen protector that actually stays on for more than a few months. There are a few other screen differences between the 165 and the 265. The 165 has a 30.4mm diameter, while the 265 comes in two sizes, a 28.1 on the smaller 265S, the one you're seeing in the video now, or a 32.5mm diameter on the regular 265. I have smaller wrists, so the regular 265 is a little bit too big for my wrist. I feel like it fits a little bit too big, and the 265S is just a little bit too small, and I just really like the in-between of the Garmin 165. I really like this size. I think it's going to suit a lot more people. Aside from the size of the screen, the 165 uses a chemically strengthened glass, while the 265 uses the Corning Gorilla Glass 3, which is stronger and more scratch resistant. I tend to always have a screen protector on my watches, and if you're concerned about durability, they're easy to apply and cheap to use. And that's one big area of difference between the 165 and the 265. It's the screen, the size of the screen, and the glass that's being used. But those differences really for you as a user are mostly going to be aesthetic. Same thing on the buttons. They both have 5, but the 165 uses completely plastic ones versus the metal finish of the 265. It's really subtle, and if you're not looking for it, you probably won't even notice that difference. The buttons also work very much in the same way. To start an activity, you hit the run button, then choose your activity, like running. You'll have your metrics on the screen, including pace, heart rate, and distance, and you can customize these screens to your liking. Or turn off the touchscreen when working out, plus toggle through screens during your run. One other difference when it comes to those buttons between the 165 and the 265 is on the 265 you can map the buttons to have custom functions. So you can go into the menu and have the button over here, have that go into time zones, for example, if that's something that you change frequently. Whereas on the 165 you can't map the buttons to have customizable functions. It's a small difference, but an important difference for some of you who use that function already on your current watch. And there are a few other differences that I want to tell you about, but while you're thinking about this, while you're listening to the differences in the glass and the button customizability and all those things, just keep in the back of your mind that there is a $200 difference between the 165 and the 265, and just keep thinking whether or not the things that I'm telling you, the differences that I'm telling you between these two watches, is it worth $200 to you? like the GPS. The 165 uses a single GPS system, whereas the 265 can use multi-band GPS. All of this is to say that the 265 will be more precise in GPS tracking, especially in areas where signals might be sparse or where there are tall buildings, but in reality, we're talking a few meters or feet of difference. The 165 also has only about half the training activities available on the 265. Activities like skiing, snowboarding, and triathlon mode are missing, which is a shame if you do winter sports or play field hockey, for example. But the classic functions like running, strength training, walking, swimming, biking, those are all here. You have the same step counter, calories burned tracker, floors climbed, pulse ox, and heart rate tracking. Although it's using the previous version heart rate tracker, it's close enough to give you an idea of what zone that you might be training in. There are two notable screens missing in the 165 that the 265 has, and those are training readiness and the training status functions. The training readiness gives you an idea of how hard you might be working out, which I don't find all that useful, but the training status has some fun metrics. It shows you a graph of your VO max, not just the number, but where you might be trending, plus a breakdown of how you're training. None of those data screens are going to make or break your workout, and make no mistake, the 165 has a lot of data for you, so after you work out, you're going to get a ton of statistics here and in the Garmin Connect app, which you load on your phone, and you're going to get even more statistics and data on your phone itself. It's just missing a couple of screens from the 265. And clearly Garmin wanted to differentiate these two watches, and they chose to do that through software, which, as an aside, Garmin does that a lot. Why do you do that? It is very annoying. This watch can support the software that this watch is running for the most part. And I know they intentionally do that, and I know they've got to differentiate their watches. And like I've said in previous videos, I wish they would just make the differences more hardware based. Like, the plastic trim here, the screen being, not Gorilla Glass, all those things should equate to the price difference. I just wish we had the software that's running on the 265 running on the devices that can support it, like the 165. It's using the older heart rate monitor, so that should be, where the cost differences are. Just a personal gripe I have. Anyway, back to the rest of the video. But even with those artificial software limitations, there isn't a whole lot of difference between the Garmin 165 and the 265, except $200. I don't think the differences in the screen are going to matter to a lot of you, and I don't think the fact that it doesn't have multi-band GPS is going to matter to most of you. Now, where you may find the 165 lacking are in those activities. So if you do a lot of paddleboarding or snowboarding, those are missing in the 165, and for you, it might be worth it to pay extra for the 265. However, if you just mainly use this watch for running, walking, swimming, those kind of activities, you should probably save your money. Unless you want a few extra data screens on top of that or redshift mode, you can probably save your money. Unless you want 2 more days of battery life, that's 13 days versus 11 days on the 165, then you can probably save your money. And although you should never buy a product based on the promise of future updates, lately Garmin has been adding features to the 265 from their higher-end watches with software updates, so I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the line that happens with the 165, but like I said, don't count on it and buy the 165 for what it is right now. So I think Garmin's strategy with the 165 is this. So I've got a 265 and you might have a 265 or a Fenix, for example, one of the higher end Garmin watches that are more for outdoors and things like that. So I would notice those things missing from the 165. Like, I tend to use all the features of this watch. And so if I went to my next watch, it probably wouldn't be a 165. It'd probably be the next version of the 265 because I want all those data screens that I've gotten used to and all the features that I'm using, and I go skiing and all that stuff. And I probably wouldn't go to the 165. Now, if you don't have a Garmin watch at all, it's your first Garmin watch, you don't want to just drop $500 on a new watch, then the 165 makes perfect sense for you because you're not going to notice what it's missing, because what it's missing from the 265 isn't a whole lot. And for your first fitness focused smartwatch, $250 is not inexpensive. So this is a good sort of jump into the Garmin world, and that's where I think they positioned this watch. It's a good, solid, I want to say entry level, but it is a good fitness focused watch. It's going to give you a ton of features, a ton of data, a ton of functions, and then later down the line it might bring you into the Garmin ecosystem. Then you may upgrade to whatever the next version of this is, or the higher version or something like that. But I think this is more of an entry into the Garmin world and not so much, hey, You've got already a 265. Do you want to just downgrade to a 165? I don't think most people are going to do that. This is your entry into the Garmin world. Both watches sync with the Garmin Connect app, have similar enough features, and aren't too physically different to matter to most of you. There are a few other differences, but they're generally in the weeds of the settings and you probably won't use them very frequently, but I'll just mention a couple of them here to give you an idea of what those differences are. The virtual partner feature where you can race against a specific time and pace, which I don't use, but that's missing from the Garmin 165. Some Garmin accessories also work better with the 265, but I personally don't use those either. If you want to watch you can make and take calls from, take a look at the Garmin Venue 3 because it is more of a smartwatch with fitness-focused features, whereas the Forerunner 165 is more of a fitness-focused watch that has almost all of the features of its more premium version for about $200 less. And if you're looking for a watch that you can track your workouts with or your runs with, I would take a look at the 165 first before considering shelling out $450 for the 265. That's my review of the Garmin Forerunner 165. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below. And while you're down there, hit the like and subscribe buttons. I'll have new videos for you every week, and I'll see you in the next video.